Today, what we're going to be talking about are vegetables in containers, containers and potting mix, vegetable plant needs, planting in containers, water and fertilizer, and harvest and storage. So this is what we're going to go over. And then, like I mentioned, at the very end, we will have questions. So what should you grow? My very first garden, I was about 12 or 13, and I planted tons of everything because I was going to make so much money selling vegetables in the neighborhood. And we actually did. We peddled our vegetables with a little wheelbarrow. And imagine my little brother and I, we were so cute. Who wants to buy cucumbers? Would you like to buy 4 ears of corn for $1? And we made what we thought was big money at the time. But it was a lot, and the weeds got crazy, and that can happen. So you just want to make sure you plant enough, but not too much. It's sometimes easy to overplant because the seed packets have so many seeds. I mean, why would they put so many seeds in there if they don't want you to plant them all, right? And also remember, just like I said with eggplant, which was not my favorite vegetable originally, if you keep trying something, you will either eventually like it or you will just decide it is really not for you. So here are some of the vegetables that grow well in containers. I won't read this because I know you probably already have it in front of you. But we are going to be focusing, you'll see, on the ones that grow well in spring. So this is the vegetable planting guide that we gave you for the summer, fall vegetables. And if you look on the other side, it has the spring and winter planting times for the Sacramento area. This was created with from UC Davis, so we just borrowed it from them. And we are planning to have Ro teach a class in the cool season on cool season vegetables. So we'll be talking more about those. A couple years ago, I gave a class at the Patterson Garden Club, and I told them all about growing vegetables in the winter time. And this man raised his hand later and he said, "You have just ruined my entire winter vacation. I told my wife nothing grows in the winter, and that's when I sit in my easy chair. And now she knows the truth." So yes, there are tons of vegetables that can be grown this time of year. All right, so let's talk about where you're going to put your garden. Some of you may already have a garden where you can dig in the ground, but for those of you who don't, that's what we're focusing on today, are patios and balconies and what you can grow there. Most plants need at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, but our leafy root vegetables can take 4 to 6 hours. So choosing a container, you do want to be careful about this. The size should fit the plant. So essentially, we're going to be talking about mostly using 5 gallons, 1 gallons, 2 gallons, depending on what you grow. Of course, if it's bigger than that, that's fine too. The main thing is to make sure that you drill holes if there are any holes missing. Otherwise, you could have problems. Drainage is really important to root health. So there's some different materials you can use. You just have to remember, here in the Central Valley, it gets super hot. Dark colored containers will absorb more heat. The lighter ones will reflect it. And your containers may dry out really quickly in the summer. So just like at a regular nursery, if you go and they have small pots and containers, you'll see in August, they're watering things several times a day. So you'll just have to test the soil to see. Make sure if you've got a really heavy container and you want to move it around, you might want to put a pot trolley under it before it's too late and you need a muscle man to help you pick it up. And also, sometimes we can unknowingly stain a porch or patio. If you live in an apartment complex, you don't want to get in trouble for that. So you may want to have a saucer underneath. Make sure that that water doesn't just fill up and sit there, because mosquitoes do not need very much water before they start to reproduce. And you do not want to start a mosquito pond on your porch. So I mentioned before the minimum container size, and here are some of the crops that can be grown in at least 2 gallons. The crops that need at least 5 gallons are listed here as well. All right, what are some creative containers for those of you who don't want to get a bunch of large, expensive containers? There's a lot of things that you can repurpose. Like I mentioned before, just make sure that there are holes drilled in the bottom. And look, one of our master gardeners took some of these great photos of creative uses, such as a pallet that somebody put a back on and filled up with soil, wooden boxes, an old wine barrel. So there's a lot of things you can use. The potting mix that you want to use, you want to make sure it's a good quality potting mix from a nursery or garden center. A lot of times people will say, well, why can't I just put the outdoor soil that I already have in my garden? That's because you could be bringing weeds, seeds, diseases, and other pests. It makes the container really hard to move. And also what will happen is that soil will compact into the container and make it harder to have good drainage. So we really encourage the use of this potting mix. And every year you may need to add a little more, because potting mix is essentially organic matter that's constantly breaking down all the time. So you may be wondering, should I plant seeds? Should I plant transplants? A lot of times that depends on the time of year. If you get an early jump on the season, you can grow some of these things inside with grow lights. But as the season goes on, you may rather purchase them as a transplant, which is just those small plants that you see at a nursery or a garden center. I have seen root vegetables for sale in 6-packs, and it made me laugh because first of all, roots don't transplant well, but also they're much easier to plant from seed, and you wouldn't need to go that far. So some of the root vegetables that we can plant in the spring include carrots, and it looks like I see Ro has joined us. You're back. Let me unmute you.
Oh.
Miss Ro, what happened? Did you have some technical difficulties?
Yes, we did, as they say in the business.
Okay, well, you can see we are on the slide about, where'd you go? Ro.
Hi.
Maybe I just can't see you. Okay, your little picture disappeared. There you are. Okay, so what you can do is go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay.
I had pretty much finished up this slide, I think. I did want to mention that certain seeds are easier to grow from seed, and others like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants are a little more difficult to get started. And sometimes it could be because they take 7 to 10, even 20 days to germinate. So just keep that in mind. And over to you, Ro.
Thank you. So we want to talk a little bit. Hi, my name is Ro Yair, Rhoda Yair. Most people call me Ro. It's so nice to see everyone here, especially after being, I don't know where I was, kind of a fun thing, a little excitement. And I kept thinking, I don't know what they can hear, so I didn't say anything, which was probably wise, right? Okay, seeds versus transplants. The transplants, because the seeds are little, those are plants that are little. Should we go on from this one, Anne, or have you already covered this one pretty well? I'm sorry.
Sorry, yes, no, go to the next slide.
Okay, maybe, let's see.
Oh, wait a minute, just
wait
kidding.
A minute.
I'm controlling your slideshow now, so
okay.
I will be paying close attention.
When I stop talking, you'll change it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right. So if you're gonna do seeds, number one is you read a seed packet. And I remember when I first started gardening, I didn't know what that thing was for. So it's real important because it has a lot of information, like how deep do you plant the seed? And you don't have to have a tape measure out in the garden with you, just kind of, or at your containers, just kind of judge it. How far apart? Well, some of these things you're only going to put one plant per pot, and we'll talk about that eventually. So you don't have to worry about that. The important thing is, when will it sprout? 7 to 10 days, and then matures in 60 days. And about how many seeds in here? 25. That's a lot of Gold Rush hybrid squash, and we'll talk about that also. But as you can see down at the bottom, it says packed for 2017, selling by 12/17. That means I have to use them all immediately? Next. No, because we've also included the seed life expectancy thing chart, and it tells you how long usually these seeds can stay in a dark place. In other words, you keep them in that envelope just kind of fold it down, put a paper clip on it, put it someplace where it's not going to be real hot, you know, the back of a cabinet or something, but don't forget about it, which kind of happens around this place. But as you can see, some of these things last a while. And remember the packet of the squash, there were 25. Well, I don't think anyone's going to want 25 squash, maybe 2 or 3. But if you don't want to share them, you can always just put them away for the next year. Next. Okay, what is a seed? It's a little embryo, and it's covered by a protective coating. That's so that nothing can get to it, because there is something inside that is just ready. It's going to germinate, and it's going to become something wonderful for you. Some of them have more protection than others. There's a little bit of food in there, and they will germinate when the temperature is right and when it's kept moist. I don't know if Anne mentioned this, but there are these people who have to get their tomatoes out February 1st or whatever. They're not going to, some stuff's not going to start growing until the soil gets a certain temperature. And that's the way with seeds. It has to be a regular temperature. Okay, this is what the seed looks like. I love this picture. I think I might want to put this on my wall. I just think it's wonderful.
We'll frame it for you.
See all those little root hairs? Those are going to be roots. It's very delicate. And that's what the minerals and the water, how it's absorbed into the little seedling. And when that pushes through the soil, and this becomes your plant. And you want to be real careful with that, because it's very, very, very fragile. You keep them moist. Big question, why did my seeds come up? Well, maybe you buried them a little too deeply, didn't keep them consistently moist, or the seeds expired. That does happen. You know, even though we say it's good for 2 years, maybe it, you know, you had something that wasn't as good. But usually the seeds will come up. Now, if it's not, okay, probably about a week and a half ago, I planted some squash, and they should have come up immediately. I mean, almost. It took them forever, but the temperature wasn't right. We went through a real wet, dark period, so they didn't get the sunshine, but they're coming up now. Okay, easy seeds to grow. Those are those large seeds, and you can put 2 or 3 per container. Now, so 2 or 3 seeds. Make certain that you've got them at the correct depth, spacing. And then the worst part for most gardeners is what's called thinning. We'll talk about that in a second. But squash, peas, cucumbers, beans, mini pumpkins, those are fun things. And they're easy to handle, especially if you're gardening with younger children, or maybe an older person who has dexterity problems. These big seeds are easy to handle. The tricky ones are those little vegetables, and you know, what's 1/8 of an inch deep, you know, like radishes, leaf lettuce. So what you're going to do is you're going to sprinkle the seeds on the soil, and then you're going to very carefully cover it with another handful of soil. You don't want to bury them too deeply, because you'll never get them to grow, to germinate. And label. Now, a lot of people think it's really neat to use those packages, and you use those real. No, because first of all, you may have more seeds. You're going to put them away at a safe place. Just keep that same package, like I said, wrap it up, put it away. But also, after a while of watering and sunshine, those labels can sometimes fade away. So you can purchase really neat. They've got some beautiful labels. You can use a popsicle stick. It's also a good reason. You can get a popsicle to eat first, and then you get the stick afterwards. Some people have used mini blinds. They've cut them up. Those are great, because you know, they're made of a very nice thin plastic. Use a permanent marker, and the important thing is write the date that you're planting. Remember, the seeds germinate in so many days, give or take. If it says 7 to 10 days, after 3 weeks, if they haven't germinated, you're probably not going to have them. So that's why that date is on very, very important. Okay, 3 weeks, you have to thin, and that's choosing which seedling to keep and which one to remove. And that is a killer for most of us. You have to remove some of the seedlings so they have enough space, especially if you're working in a container. And it's difficult because you want to keep all the seedlings, and you want to try to, and sometimes, again, if you're working with children, they'll want to try to take that seedling and plant it somewhere else. Chances are it's not going to grow, but that's okay. You just have to explain to them that this is how you garden, And there's a real good thing that you can do with those additional seeds, those seedlings that you pull out. Again, review how far apart the plant should be, the little seedlings, and very carefully pinch off the top or scissor it off, or I have a friend who uses chopsticks and just reaches in and pulls out. Saves those little sprouts, wash them off, and you can put them in a salad or you can put them on a sandwich. And then your gardener who doesn't want to thin anything, at least is getting something good out of those. Transplants. That's that bigger plant that you buy in the garden already grown or kind of grown. They're about 6 weeks old or maybe a little bit older. And this, it'll make your garden establish very, very quickly. And that's stuff like peppers and tomatoes and eggplant. Those transplant beautifully. And it's really easier than working with seeds, especially for a new gardener. Okay, this is kind of what it looks like. And sometimes they come in little 4-inch pots. Sometimes they'll come in what they call a pony pack. And there may be 6 or 8 plants to a pack. And what you do is very, very carefully ease it out. Now they are delicate. Even though they're 6 or 7 or 8 weeks old, they're very delicate and they can break right down at the base between the root ball and where the stems are or the plant is. So ease it out and then look at the root ball. You might want to very gently, and I say very, very gently because these are delicate, kind of loosen it up, pull apart a little bit, and then make a hole in where you're going to be planting it in your container, about the same size. Set your plant in the hole, gently move the soil in, water the root ball, and you've started your garden. Now, root vegetables need to be from seeds. It's easier. And if you're working with a young person in gardening, radishes are perfect because they seem to germinate almost overnight, and then they can very quickly watch them grow, and then they can pull them out and wash them off and they get to eat them. Those are a fun thing. Beets, also the same thing, is you want to use seeds. Buying a 6-pack of beets, you're going to have 6 beets. You're going to thin these seedlings again. Remember, you've got to give them some space to grow. Because if you have these little, especially radishes, all so close together, which they will be because it's real hard to handle radish seeds, you're going to have little tiny skinny radishes. You want bigger radishes. And again, if you're working with that young person who doesn't want to thin, wash them off, show them how they can eat these. It doesn't hurt them. They might even enjoy them. Okay, radishes and beets, you harvest them when you're going to eat them. And it's kind of fun because like with a radish, you can see it growing above the soil, and the kids can say, or if you're working with a young person, that's time to pick it, and they'll pull it out and make certain they wash it off. They usually don't want to do that, but it's a fun thing. It'll stay for a while until you're ready to eat it in the ground. Now, if it starts getting warm around here, that's real difficult for radishes. They often get very, very spicy. But if you don't mind spicy radishes, you can keep them in while it gets warmer. And of course, store them in the refrigerator if you're not eating them. That 4 to 6 inch container works great. A nice broad one. And any variety of radish. And there are tons of types of radishes out now. You can plant in the spring and the summer, the fall, just about all the time. You sprinkle the seeds in a row, cover lightly, water. They'll germinate in a few days and you'll thin in about 3 weeks. But you can keep adding different crops. That's why you put that date on there. Maybe every 4 weeks you want to do another crop of radishes. And that way, whoever you're gardening with, or if you're gardening it for yourself, you always have a supply of radishes, which are good to eat. Now, we're going to talk about fruit vegetables. And this I just absolutely love. And this is my trivia, and I'm a trivia fan. So many of the vegetables that are pollinated, they're the fruit of a plant, and that includes tomatoes. And if you read the blog, I've already talked about it, and I'm sorry to bore you, but I love this story. And I don't know, it's one of these things, when I heard that, I went, oh my gosh, I've got to find out more. Okay, this is a case. It was called Nix versus Hedden, and it was in 1893. It went to the United States Supreme Court over a tomato. Yep, a plain old tomato. There was this produce owner, store owner in New York City, and he was importing from Bermuda. He was reporting, this is the first one in New York City, from Florida and Virginia, which of course the United States doesn't count, but Bermuda is out of the country. And there was a tax on excuse me, there was a tax on these vegetables. And he decided that this was really silly because a tomato is not a vegetable, a tomato is a fruit. So he sued the tax collector in New York City. It got to the Supreme Court because they kept going through different cases. The Supreme Court came down, and I think you'll love this. Basically, the argument was definitions in a dictionary, and it came down to, yes, botanically, a tomato is a fruit, but we use it as a vegetable. So the Supreme Court said, yes, it's a fruit, but we use it as a vegetable, so it's a vegetable. Consequently, Mr. Nix, you don't get any money back. End of story. So other fruit vegetables are squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, and they need the flower. The flowers need those pollinators, those bees. So be careful when you're out there. Bees usually don't attack. They're too busy with doing their pollinating thing. But if you have someone in the family or someone close who's very, very allergic, just be very cautious with that. And please don't kill the bees. We really need more of those. Okay, now tomatoes. And this is really, really important when you're doing container gardening. What you want is you want determinate tomatoes. They're going to be smaller. They're going to stay so that you can handle them. There are lots of kinds out there. There's the Celebrity and the Roma. My favorite is the Sun Gold. The indeterminate types, and it'll say it on the tag when you're buying your tomatoes, or if you have to order them, which is what we're doing now with a lot of our nurseries and our garden departments. You have to order and pick them up, but tell them you want the determinate tomatoes. Something maybe that says Pixie or Patio in the name. That was perfect. Okay, we're going to show you how to plant the tomato because there are two different ways. See that cute little tomato there on the right? That's a nice shaped plant. And all you have to do is gently put the soil over the plant, tamp it down a little bit, and water it. This tomato is what we would call a little lanky, but you don't cut it from the top. What you do very, very carefully is you remove anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 of the branches, those little leaves, very carefully. And the reason I'm telling you carefully is because I have cut through them, okay? I have made these mistakes. Make your own mistakes, don't make the ones I make. So I'll tell you which ones not to do. So you just have to be real careful, and you plant the tomato so that all of those stems that you have removed are covered. They become roots, and that'll make a stronger plant. Not to mention, you don't want a plant that long, especially when you're starting. And most of the plants that you're going to be doing will be shorter and smaller. Okay, when the fruit looks the right color, that nice color that you like, it gives slightly when gently pressed, it's ready to pick. Use your clippers or some scissors, remove it from the plant, and if possible, eat it immediately. Don't store it in the refrigerator or store it on the counter. Nothing is better than tomatoes. Okay, summer squashes. And this is a zucchini, but they're also crookneck. They're all kinds. You want the bush variety, remember, compact. If you have one that starts vining a little bit, you're going to have to put a trellis on it or a cage of some kind, but that's not a big deal. Your pot should be 24 inches, about 1.5 foot to almost 2 feet deep. And you want to watch for squash bees that visit the flowers. Remember, this is one of those that is a fruit vegetable that's going to be pollinated. Okay, eggplant, 5-gallon container, which Ann went through. Those big containers, those big things you get from the big box stores, those are perfect. It doesn't say it needs a support. I always put a support around my eggplant just so the eggplant aren't on the soil. You harvest again with pruning shears, store on the counter until you're ready to eat it, and you can store it for about 3 days in the refrigerator and use it immediately. And if you need some recipes or some ideas, just let me know. I
Oh, that's a
love
great idea,
eggplant.
Ro. Maybe we should share one of your recipes.
Okay, one of my
All
favorite
right, we
ones,
can
and
send that out.
I love them fried, but I know we're not supposed to. Slice it thinly. I put a little bit of olive oil if you want to put some garlic in there, garlic powder, or some herbs or anything. Brush it, and then I grill it both sides. It is delicious. You can even use it like for lasagna. Use that
Ooh.
instead of noodles. So
Ooh.
it is a wonderful recipe.
Oh, I like that idea, using eggplant instead of lasagna noodles. I'm gonna try
Well,
that.
a lot of people, and
Yeah.
it just, it's delicious. And it also freezes real well when
Hmm,
you put it into a casserole. So you can make an extra
awesome.
casserole with your extra tomatoes and freeze everything. And in the winter, you have fresh vegetables.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, beans, those little bush beans, 2-gallon size pot. And if it's a climbing bean, you have to have some type of support. Snap it off, store it in the refrigerator, and enjoy. Cucumbers, you're going to need at least 3 for pollination. Again, they have to, those little bees have, and insects have to go from flower to flower. Things like patio pickle and bush champion. Again, when you're ordering or you're buying, make certain that you're not getting something that's going to be viney, because they can grow forever. Now, if you do get a vining one, put in a trellis, put in a cage, and you just talk to it and make certain that it goes up the cage. You'll be okay. The bush ones won't need support, but you can also put a cage around that, and that kind of keeps everything inside. Peppers, oh my gosh, there are so many of them. And if you are a salsa lover and you're growing tomatoes, you've got to have the peppers, and they are great. You'll use a 5-gallon bucket, and at least 16 inches deep and about 12 inches wide. The varieties, I mean, everything from it's so hot you can't eat it, to the favorite bell peppers. And bell peppers come in a variety of colors now. I don't know if you've noticed that, but there are orange ones and purple ones, and there's even one that's called a chocolate bell. It doesn't taste like chocolate. I tried. I thought for certain I had a winner.
How disappointing.
Kind of a brown color. And a cage does help them. It keeps them from going down on the ground. Oh, okay. I'm getting comments. I'm seeing those. Oh, that's neat. Okay, support. You can buy the cages. You can make it. You can get a trellis. I have a bunch of cages I bought, and I just use them from year to year. When the season's over, I just stack them up, put them out of the way. I pull them out the next year, straighten them up again, and they work great. So, you know, you say, well, I need 5 this year. Okay, so you buy 5, but you're going to have them for many years. I love this one here in the middle where someone used supports and twine, and it looks really pretty. I usually just buy the cages. And remember, be very, very gentle when you're watering, because these new plants, these new seedlings, you want to make certain they have enough water, water them regularly, but you don't want to drown them. Because, oh my goodness, all right, I'm, okay, well.
Did I go too
I'm
fast? Do you want
off
to
a
go back?
slide in my mind.
I know.
Yeah, well, it's kind of that. Your container can dry out quickly because it doesn't have, it's stationary. Test the moisture with your finger. Stick your finger in. This is the time where you got to get the gloves off and get the fingers dirty and under the nails and everything. If a couple inches down, it's dry, it probably needs to be watered. And when the weather gets warmer, you may have to water twice a day. This is just something to think about. You say, well, I always water in the morning for so many minutes. You may have to do it also later in the afternoon. It also depends on what kind of sun you're getting. Okay, now, why do you need to be careful with the water? Because roots can't swim real easily. I love this picture because you got your little particles, you got your water, but you know what else you need? You need to have air in there. And when the roots are saturated and there's no air, you're going to have problems. In fact, you're going to have dead plants. And that's why, especially in a container where you have limited space, be real cognizant of that water amount. You don't want to dry them out, but you don't want to drown them either. Okay, fertilizing. Um, those little pellets, it's a slow release. Those are great. You can just, and read the instructions, please. That's for any fertilizer. Don't be like my mother who said, if a little bit is good, twice as much is better. No, not with fertilizer. If it says, you know, a half a teaspoon per gallon or whatever, do that. There's also water-soluble fertilizers. I know you've seen those. You mix that with water in your watering can or your bucket, however you're watering, and read the instructions on how often you need to water. I mean, excuse me, fertilize. I wouldn't fertilize new plants for at least the first 2 to 3 weeks. You want to wait a little while because they've got lots of nutrients in the soil that you just put in that pot. So give them a little bit of time and then water regularly. You may want to keep a calendar of your watering and your fertilizing. Yeah, you can burn your plants. Okay, that really scares me because I've done it. Like I said, if I've made the mistake, I'll tell you I've made it.
Now, Ro, it looks
Yes.
like this presentation that I grabbed off my desktop is not the same as yours, because I believe we decided not to talk about all these pests this time.
Well,
You
go to
recall
the
that?
next one because it might be the IPM.
Oh, just kidding. It's good. Okay.
See? Yay!
Good. You
You're
remember.
perfect. You're
I was
perfect.
testing you. No.
I know. Thank you. Okay. This is a website that I just found out about last year when I was going through the Master Gardener classes. It is incredible. It's the UC IPM, which is Integrated Pest Management website. You'll have it as one of your references. I don't know what I did before. Well, I tell you what I did before. I burned things and I drowned things and
Might have Googled it and found crazy answers.
Oh, it's so great. So you'll
Mhm.
see when you go on there, you'll first go to Home Garden Turf because you've got a problem. You found something in your cucumbers or you found something in your tomatoes. So you'll go there and then.
I will hover over this area right here, Ro. I don't know where our
Okay,
little
well,
red arrow
I
went.
think what's the next
There
slide?
was a red arrow. Oh, here we go.
Ah, there we go. Okay. There you go. Go to vegetables and melons. Don't panic. We're getting you there. And then you just go to the vegetable that you're having the problem with. How neat is that? I'm amazed, just amazed. So you have something wrong with that tomato, go to tomatoes and it'll tell you, well, then you become really worried and you start looking for things, but that's okay. That's better than not looking for things. Okay, as Ann said in the beginning, we were in a cooperation with our friends at the Stanislaus County Library. Unfortunately, we can't have the classes, but there are lots and lots of books on their Hoopla. And if you're not familiar with Hoopla, get to know it. This is beautiful, and it doesn't cost anything. Complete Guide for Growing Vegetables and Flowers, beautiful book.